Abu Barza al-Aslami, describing him, he mentioned, وَكَانَتْ فِيهِ الدَّمَامَ وَقِصَرْ, that he was an individual that was deformed. وَقِصَرْ, and he was short. And it is said in the books of Tariq, due to the fact of his appearance, of how he looked, short and deformed, due to this nature not having any lineage, because in the time of the Arabs, if you had lineage and if you belonged to a certain tribe, you had strength. But Xhulejbibit did not have no lineage, did not belong to any tribe. And on top of that, his disfigurement, he was deformed, and likewise he was short. And some of the books of Tariq that have mentioned, likewise, he was an individual that was ugly. Radiyallahu ta'ala an. So due to these factors, you found that he did not have, or you will find that he did not have many friends. He was an individual that was not welcomed very easily in gatherings. He's an individual that was extremely poor. Up until the coming of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Wallahi ikhwan, the story is magnificent. It is mentioned that when the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam came, he began to come to the gatherings and listen to the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So much so that he became a close companion of the Messenger. That the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam wished for Xhulejbibit to get married. Even with the form that he was in, he wanted good for Xhulejbibit. He became his companion. So then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he went to one of the families of the Ansar, and he said that verily, Zawijni bintak, marry me your daughter. So upon hearing this, the father was delighted. Ni'ma wa karama, a blessing. And then the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, it is not for me, it is for Xhulejbibit. And upon hearing this, he was shocked. But how can you refuse the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam? So then he went and he said, Ushawir zawjati, let me go and speak to my wife. So then he went and told that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam is requesting the hand of our daughter. And likewise she was pleased. Ni'ma wa karama, what a blessing. And then he said, but it's not for him, it is for Xhulejbibit. And she was shocked. In some of the narration it mentions anybody except for Xhulejbibit. In one narration it mentions Xhulejbibit ibnu, Xhulejbibit ibnu. Xhulejbibit, is it his son? Is it his son? Meaning that why would he ask the hand, our daughter's hand, for the likes of Xhulejbibit? Because this was an individual ikhwan that had nothing. He had no money. And look at the form that he had. So now, how can the father bring this news to the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam? And then upon hearing this conversation, it was the daughter that said that who is requested my hand? And they said the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam is requesting for Xhulejbibit. And then she said, Aturuduna ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam wa amruhu? Are you going to refuse the order and the request of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam? You were going to refuse? She said, Idfa'uni, allow me, meaning that allow me to speak, for verily I will marry him. فَلَا يُضَيْعُونِ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. For verily the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam will not betray and forsake me. If it is the Messenger that is saying this, then I submit to him. سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. We hear and we obey. And from here it mentions that this tremendous verse came down. That it is not for the believer, man or woman, to have any say after an affair has been decreed. And then she married Xhulejbibit. And some of the books of Tariq, it mentions Xhulejbibit, Afwan, the wife of Xhulejbibit, was extremely beautiful. And Then it goes on, ikhwan, the qissa, that not long after he married his wife, jihad was called. So then he went and fought alongside the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, even though he was newly married. And at that time, ikhwan, he could have stayed in the comfort of his new wife. But how could he stay home when the noble Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam's life was in danger and fighting on the battlefield? This was the way of the Sahaba. So then he left with the Messenger and he fought. That he was short, and the size of his sword was nearly the size of him. But he fought, ikhwan, with courage. And he fought like a lion. And then after the battle, the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, go out, is any of you losing anybody? Have you lost anybody? أَتَفْقِدُونَ فُلَانًا? Have you lost anybody from your tribe or your family? So they went out to look, and then they came back, so the Messenger repeated it the second time. So they went out again and looked for their family. And on the third time, they said, we have found everybody, Ya Rasulullah. And then he mentions, وَلَكِنِّي أَفْقُدُ Xhulejbibit. But verily I have lost Xhulejbibit. Verily I have lost my beloved Xhulejbibit. So they went out to look for him, and they found him. And when the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he came and stood over his body, it mentioned, he said, قَتَلُوا سَبْعَ ثُمَّ قَتَلُوا. Verily, he killed 7. There were 7 bodies around him from the disbelievers. And he said, verily, he killed 7. And then they killed him. And then he went on to mention, هُوَ مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنْهُ. Verily, he is from me, and I am from him. He mentioned it 3 times. He mentioned it 3 times. And then it mentions that he was so poor, they had nothing to lay him on, to lower him into the grave. And then it mentions that the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam picked him up with his sacred hands and lowered him into the grave. Lowered him into the grave. And when he was doing this, it mentions that the Sahaba were in tears. Ikhwan, if you surrender to the way of Allah Azza wa Jal, if you turn back to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ikhwan, then that is the real izzah. That is the real honor. Look at Xhulejbibit. He was a nobody in the sense of his wealth and his appearance. But he was beloved to the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he was beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And regarding his wife, ikhwan, then it mentions that after his death, she was the most sought after widow from the people of Ansar. And why was that, ikhwan? Because it was known from her way that she was a woman that put forth Allah and the Messenger first. She was known to be a woman that says, Sami'na wa ata'na, that we hear and we obey. And that should be an example for every one of the women, our daughters, our mothers, our wives, that look how this woman was. Look the sacrifices that she made purely to follow the request of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And in one narration it mentions the famous statement of her where she says, Raditu wa salamtu bima radiya bihi Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. She said, I am pleased and I have submitted to that which is pleasing to the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam.